think of him often. Exodus chapter 15, verses 19 through 21. Miriam was her name, and through the sea she came. A slave was she, who got set free from the trouble she had known. And when she had a chance, she encouraged the Israel daughters to dance. And she kept time to her song sublime as she beat the meter on her tambourine. Sing to the Lord and exalt him with me. The horse and its rider he has hurled into the sea. She was called a prophetess. God spoke through her, oh yes. Some found this odd that the one true God led the Israelites on their way. They came through the waters, those Hebrew sons and daughters, at night a pyre of burning fire and a pillar of cloud by day. Aaron was her brother. Moses, he was the other. And by all claims, their parents' names were Amram and Jochebed. They used to live in Goshen, but then they got the notion that they should leave because they believed they were headed for the promised land instead. We are bound for the promised land. We are bound for the promised land. Oh, who will come and go with me? We're bound for the promised land. 400 years before, when they had no food in store, Egyptians had to give them food for them to live. If not, they would have died. The children of Israel did well, their numbers did swell. At a very fast pace, the Hebrew race was fruitful and multiplied. It was Joseph who got there first, sold as a slave and cursed by a band of brothers with different mothers he did not understand. But Joseph, he rose to the top. From slave to prince, flip-flop, a really big thing. He was second to the king, Pharaoh, ruler of the land. Sing to the Lord and exalt him with me. The horse and its rider he has hurled into the sea. So when the famine came, his brothers were not shamed. He gave them food, though they'd been rude, and he sent to Canaan for their father. Many years later in Goshen, there came a big commotion when a Pharaoh rose who dared suppose the Hebrews were a bother. He thought they were a threat. How could that man forget that Joseph was a big deal cause he'd been Pharaoh's right-hand man? They had not misbehaved, but yet they were enslaved. Some were whipped in old Egypt, and that's when the worst of it began. Sing to the Lord and exalt him with me. The horse and its rider he has hurled into the sea. They toiled and slaved in the sun. Their work seemed never done, but babies were born despite the scorn. Each child was a bundle of joy. The Hebrews were distressed. Yes, they were sore oppressed. When Pharaoh said on the birthing beds, you must kill each baby boy. Then Pharaoh was dismayed when the midwives disobeyed. The boys were spared. The midwives dared to let the little boys survive. And Pharaoh was so vile, he screamed, throw them in the Nile. Drowning never fails, kill all the males, but keep the little girls alive. Sing to the Lord and exalt him with me. The horse and its rider he has hurled into the sea. That's when a boy so fine was born. And when he whined, they put the baby under cover so no one would discover. But they couldn't keep him quiet because he made so much noise. When he was 3 months old, he cried for his supper, I'm told. That child was so loud, they thought he'd draw a crowd, and they couldn't keep him quiet with his toys. Shh, shh, hush, little baby, don't say a word. Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird. If that mockingbird don't sing, Mama's gonna buy you a diamond ring. So they put him in a basket which they lined with tar and pitch, so it would float just like a boat. And they put him in the reeds along the river. Miriam watched her little brother. She made a promise to her mother. She said, I'll stay close by and pray that the Lord will save the day and deliver. The basket might have sunk or capsized going kerplunk. She feared for him because her brother couldn't swim. As a swimmer, he was only a beginner. A baby all alone going into the unknown, while floating down the Nile, a giant crocodile might swallow him up for dinner. Sing to the Lord and exalt him with me. The horse and its rider he has hurled into the sea. As Miriam stayed close by, hoping baby brother wouldn't die, Pharaoh's daughter came down to the water to bathe in the river of the Nile. She heard a baby cry, sent a servant to find out why. When she saw that child so meek and mild, the little Hebrew baby made her smile. Pharaoh's daughter took pity on the pretty little baby, oh so bitty. Would you like for me to try, said Miriam the spy, to find you a Hebrew nurse? Pharaoh's daughter said yes, said she'd pay no less. So Miriam's brother was nursed by his mother and paid from Pharaoh's purse. We're in the money, we're in the money. We've got a lot of what it takes to get by. Pharaoh's daughter stopped, decided she'd adopt. In the palace he stayed where his mother got paid, and she gave her little baby a name. Moses, drawn from the water, named by Pharaoh's daughter. He came to be of high degree, but he was still a Hebrew just the same. Sing to the Lord and exalt him with me. The horse and its rider he has hurled into the sea. Yes!
Thank you, Thelma Thomas.
You're welcome.
I don't see Margaret Newton's name on the attendees list, but then there's some people who might not have their names. It might be someone else's name or a telephone number or something. So Margaret, if you are there, just give us a note in the chat. Oh, there goes my timer. So. Next up would be Philip. Thank you.
Coming to you from Australia, from the southeast corner, and today I'd like to share with you the man whose mother was a pirate. It's actually a children's picture book, but it was brought to me by a storyteller as a call story to storytelling. Once there was a little man who had never seen the sea, even though his mother was an old pirate woman. They lived in a large city far, far away from the seaside. The little man always wore a respectable brown suit and respectable brown shoes. He worked in a neat little office and wrote down lines and lines of numbers and ruled lines under them. Well, one day his mother said to him, "Shipmate, I want to see the sea again. I want to fire my old silver pistol and see the waves slap the ships." "Oh, mother, we don't have a car or a bicycle. We haven't even got a horse. We haven't got any money either. We must make do. All we have is a kite and a wheelbarrow. I'm going to go and polish my cutlass and load my pistol." The little man went to work. "Please, Mr. Fat," he begged his mother, his boss, please may I have 2 weeks vacation so that I can take my mother to the seaside? I don't go to the seaside. Why should you? Well, it's for my mother. She used to be a pirate. Oh, well, that's different then, said Mr. Fat, who rather would have liked to have been a pirate himself. But make sure you're back in 2 weeks or I'll buy a computer. So off they set, with the little man pushing the wheelbarrow and his mother sitting in the wheelbarrow holding the kite. His mother wore a green scarf, gold earrings, and in her mouth was her old black pipe, and behind one ear a crimson rose. The little man wore his brown suit buttoned and his brown shoes tied. And as they trundled along, his mother talked of the sounds of the sea. It smiles with a booming voice and screams. It lost my line. There's a lot of voices in the sea and a lot of gossip too. Where are the great whales sailing? Is the ice moving in Hudson Bay? What's the weather in Tierra del Fuego? The sea knows the answers to a lot of questions, and one wave tells another. Yes, mother, said the little man, whose shoes hurt him rather. Where are you off to? Asked the farmer. I'm taking my mother to the seaside. Oh, I wouldn't go there myself. The sea's up and down with the waves and in and out with the tide. Sea doesn't stay put like a good hill does. Well, my mother likes things that don't stay put. In the back of his mind, the little man began to hear a song, and he wondered whether this could be the song of the sea. Ah, it's bright in the sunlight. I've seen it. Gold in the sunlight, silver in the moonlight, and black as ink at night. It's never the same twice. They came to a river. There was no boat. So the little man tied the kite to the wheelbarrow, and a wind blew up, ruffling his collar and teasing his neat moustache. And as the kite took the wheelbarrow up into the air, the little man hung on to the kite string while the woman rocked in her wheelbarrow basket. Ah, hold on, mother. This is all very well, Sam, but the sea, it tosses you up and pulls you down. It pushes you forward and calms you down. It storms you and stills you. It's never the same twice. The sound in the back of the little man's mind was getting louder and louder. And as he watched, the wings of the birds in the sky looked like the wings of ships at sea. The kite let them down at the other side of the river. Where are you going? Asked a philosopher fellow who was reading a book under a tree. I'm taking my mother to the seaside. Ah, what misery. Well, I didn't think much of the idea at first, but it's beginning to grow on me. Go back, little man. The things you hope for are never as wonderful as you think they'll be. The joke's less funny. The water's less warm. The taste is never as good as the smell. The voice was getting louder in the back of his mind. Hurry up, said his mother. The sea's calling. And as he trundled off, he realized that his suit had lost all its buttons. Suddenly, something new came into the sea, into the air. "Glory, glory! There's the salt!" said the woman triumphantly. And suddenly they came over the hill, and there was the sea. And the little man could only stare. He hadn't dreamt of the bigness of it. He hadn't dreamt of the blueness of it. He opened his mouth, and the drift and the dream of it, the weave and the wave of it, the fume and the foam of it never left him again. He didn't dream that the kettle drum, it would roll like kettle drums into shore. The sea poured at his feet with soft paws. And further out, the great breakers rolled in like kings into court with their peacock feathers trailing behind them in the sea. The little man and his mother danced a hippy, happy, hoppy hornpipes along the beach, and he realized that his clothes were flying around free at last. A rosy sea captain noticed them, and he said to them, "Here be a likely couple. Will you be my balsam, madam? And you, little man, you can be my cabin boy." "Yes, thank you." "Say aye, aye, sir," roared the captain. "Aye, aye, sir," said the little man, as if he'd been saying aye, aye, sir all his life. And so Sailor Sam and his pirate mother went to sea with the sea captain. And a year later, someone brought Mr. Fat a green bottle with a letter in it. And the letter read, "Having a wonderful time. Why don't you run away to sea too?" And if you want any more moral to the story than this, then I suggest you run away to sea and find it yourself.
Right.
Thank you. And if you'd like any more of my my stories or biblical stories, you can find me on my YouTube channel.
I love that. I love that. That was great. Thank you. Thank you. We should all plug ourselves up there.
I'll put
That was great. Oh, I do want to remind the storytellers, just like Philip just did, to mute your mics after you're finished. And so next up is Jean. Did you guys get my email yesterday that had the order of people, the order of storytellers? Because I've seen surprise on your faces when I called your names. So I wonder if you got that email, or are you just going to be surprised?
It's okay. It's like a lottery, and you win when you get pulled. Oh. There was and there was not a poor peasant. Always he had little to eat. Today, yes. Tomorrow, no. One night there was a terrific storm. The wind whipped the trees as if they were feather dusters, and the sun descended, and the rain descended and covered the earth like a dark mantilla. And out of the wind and the rain there came one who knocked at the door of the peasant's hut. Now it was late, and the peasant said to his wife as he went to answer the door, "Dear God, pray that these, whoever who are there, are not hungry. There is nothing to eat in the house." And the one entered. He had a long, dark cape, sodden with rain, which he threw on the hearth to dry. And then the peasant led him to a stool by the fire and said, "Sit here, it will dry you, and I can see you are cold. It'll warm your bones." And then the peasant went and got a small table, which he lifted and brought to be beside the one who was sitting on the stool. And then, as if he were a prosperous innkeeper with a larder full of tortillas and sausages and good soup on the stove and vegetables and fowl ready to be roasted and haunches of meat, he said, "Caballero, what can I bring you to eat?" And the reply came, "Whatever you have, bring whatever you have, it will be enough." Now the peasant knew he had nothing, but he went into the kitchen anyway and searched and found in the back of the cupboard a quarter of a round of dry, stale bread, forgotten and so far back in the cupboard, not even the mice had found it. And he dusted it off, put it on a plate, and brought a copita of water, set it on the table, and said, "May the food be blessed." And the reply came, "The food is blessed." And the one who had found refuge in his house from the storm took the bread and broke it. No sooner was this done than there was another knocking at the door, and the peasant said, "Mother in heaven, protect us. This round of bread may keep your hunger until morning, but perhaps, but what of these that are at the door?" Came the reply, "Where one is fed, 100 may dine." And 2 more entered the room, men with long dark capes, sodden with rain, and they threw them on the hearth to dry, and spoke to the one who had arrived first as if they had all known each other long before. And the one who had arrived first, who seemed to be the master, said to the 2, "Sit ye down on the stools and warm yourselves." And then to the peasant he said, "Bring 2 more copitas of water. And by chance, do you have the littlest bit of fish?" Now the peasant was humiliated, and he hung his head and said quietly, "Caballero, I only have the tail of a fish that we ate 3 days ago. It is not fit to eat." "Bring it." The peasant went and got the tail of the fish and put it on a small plate and brought it to the table, and with his head hung in shame on his breast, he said, "May the food be blessed." It is blessed. And the one who seemed to be the master answered again. Another knocking at the door. "Do not beg me to bring them in," said the peasant. "One must cover one's poverty as if it were with a great cloak." Where one is fed, 100 can die. And in came 2 more, also with the cloaks that were thrown down on the hearth to dry, and the peasant drew benches for them to the table to sit. But he was too dumbfounded to speak, for on the table, the round of bread that was dry and hard, there was a platter of fresh bread, broken, ready to eat. And the tail of the fish was no longer a tail. The plate had become another platter, piled with fish. And seeing the peasant's amazement, the one who seemed to be the master smiled and said to him, "Do you not have maybe 1 small egg? Or if no egg, then maybe the shell of an egg?" The peasant was about to shake his head, and then he remembered the golondrina, the swallow who built her nest under the eaves of his house. Her nestlings had hatched that day, and the shells of their eggs were on the ground. And so out he went into the storm and picked up those shells, those fragments covered with mud, and washed them in his hand in the rainwater, brought them in, put them on a plate, and set it on the table. May the food be blessed, he said. It is blessed. And then another knocking at the door. Two more entered. The floor on the hearth was covered with cooked capes, dry, and on the table, not a little plate with fragments of shells, but a beautiful bowl filled, rounded at the top with poultry eggs. Take them, said the one who seemed to be the master. Take them and have your wife make the good tortillas, and may you and your wife eat abundantly. Well, she made the tortillas, and when the tortillas were cooked, there had been more knocking, more men coming in. And when the peasant brought the tortillas to the table, there were 13 sitting there, the one who had come first and 12 others. And they ate like hungry men eat. And when they had finished, there was enough left over of bread and fish and eggs and tortillas that the peasant and his wife would be able to eat for days afterwards. And each man slept now, wrapped in his cape that was now dry, before the fire. And in the morning, they all got up to leave. The last to leave the house was the one who had come first. He said to the peasant, ask. Whatever you ask for will be granted. Now the peasant thought, and he said, I ask that I win at whatever game I play. And then he saw the 13 go on their way, and it looked as though they walked into the sunrise, and then they were gone. Now, from that day forward, the peasant prospered at whatever line of work he undertook. He lived kindly, sharing his food, speaking well of all who came to him. And so he died, and on his way to heaven, who should he see on the path but the devil? What are you doing? Said the peasant. I'm waiting to carry away this wicked soul with me. And he pointed to a man further down the road. Well, while you wait, I'll play a game with you, and whoever wins will take the soul. Agreed? Agreed, said the devil. They played. The peasant won, and the rich man who was down the path died, and the peasant took his doomed soul upon his back and went his way to heaven. Now, at the gate was St. Peter, and the peasant knew him at once. Can I come in? He said. Of course, said St. Peter. And then he changed it. Wait, what are you bringing in with you? And the peasant showed him. You can't bring that doomed soul into here. Throw it away. Let it fall and land where the place where it was meant for it. And then the peasant reminded him of St. Peter of the night, of the wind and the rain, and when he had taken refuge in the peasant's house, and what the one had said, where one is fed, the 100 can dine. You remember that? Said St. Peter. Yes, I remember that, said the peasant. And St. Peter walked away from the gate of heaven, leaving it open, and he turned his back so that he would not see what the peasant did next. And the peasant ran. He ran through the gate of heaven, carrying with him the doomed soul of the man that he had won from the devil.
Thank you, Jean.
Thank you.
Before Michelle tells her story, Michelle Walton is up next. Because I don't think Margaret Newton has joined us. She was on the list tonight. And I believe that we would have time for a couple more stories of people who were not already signed up. If you have a story that you've developed and you know that it's under 8 minutes long, and you could put in the chat And maybe Tim would be able to promote you. Then we would have time for a couple more stories after Michelle's. And Thelma, can you mute your mic?
I thought I did.
No.
I thought I did.
Now it is. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Michelle.
Okay, so this is what I would call my introduction for my concert that I'm going to be doing in November for ABS. And I do leave you with a little bit of a teaser. So, yeah. One of my earliest faith memories along my journey, it's just the same memory as one of my first earliest memories of my dad being like Superman to me. I was in the first or second grade, I think, but it's not really important. My mom had taken me to see the priest so that we could start the preparations to fully confirm me into the Catholic faith. The priest and I were sitting in his office when my dad suddenly burst through the door and swooped me up. And I was kind of like dangling there in midair. And he kept me there as he told the priest in no uncertain terms that I was not old enough and that I did not have enough knowledge and experience to make this lifelong and important decision yet. And he carried me out the door. I tell you, at that moment, I felt like I was flying, just hanging there in his arms. And I really thought that he was invincible. Now, my mom and my dad then took my sister and I to several places of worship over the next several months. And they all varied in their worldviews and in the different denominations of Christianity. For about half or so of them, they had prearranged for of that faith community to stay afterwards and sit with us and answer any questions that my sister and I might have. Now, at home, my parents made it clear that they believed in Jesus and the Christian faith, but they also made it clear that it had to be our choice and that we had the right to ask questions. Eventually, I made the choice for myself that the Lord is my shepherd, and I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me. In the presence of my enemies, you anoint my head with oil and my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Tonight, primarily through the use of biblical stories, I am going to share with you how and why the Lord is my shepherd.
Oh.
The end.
The end.
The next part goes like 5 minutes before I found a decent stopping point.
Oh
so.
man, you had 4 minutes and 21 seconds left. No, I thought you were going to like have a picture, like you were looking down at your keyboard, and I thought you were going to like share
No,
your
I was
screen and have a
looking to
picture or
mute.
something.
I was looking to mute it.
Okay. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. We didn't get any offers to tell from another storyteller, did we, Tim? No, I don't think so. All right. Boy, that's a quiet audience tonight.
Do you want to have the call story that I tell with the call story that I just told from Luke's Gospel?
Okay.
Once, when Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, the crowds of people were pushing in on him to hear the word of God. He saw two boats by the shore. The fishermen had gone out of their boats to clean their nets. And so he sat down in one of them, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to push out a little way from the shore. And he sat down in the boat and spoke to the people from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Push out your boat into the deep and let your net down for a catch." "Master, we have fished all night long and caught nothing. But if you say so, we will let down the net." And when they did so, they caught so many fish that the net was beginning to break. So he called his partners who were in the other boat, and they came and they caught so many fish that both boats were beginning to sink. And Simon Peter said to Jesus, kneeling at his feet, "Go away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man." For he and all the others were amazed at the great catch of fish. And so were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, who were Simon's partners. Jesus said to him, "Do not be afraid, Simon. From now on, you will be catching people." And when they brought their boats to shore, they left everything and followed him. So I tell those two stories together as two call stories by the sea, and they're on that YouTube channel that I mentioned before.
Yeah.
Sorry about the ad.
Oh, no, that's good. I like that. And I like those two stories together. Tim, did you see,
Yes,
can you promote Elaine
And who's the other one?
Karen
I promoted
Karen
Elaine.
Jones.
Karen Jones, okay. Karen Jones, there she is. Promote to panelists, okay. So they are now panelists.
Okay,
Are they
great.
there?
So
Oh, they're
turn
there.
on your cameras,
Yep,
your video.
there's
All right.
Elaine. All right.
Okay,
Okay,
great.
you can hear me?
Yes. So
Okay.
Karen, go ahead and mute your mic and we'll go Elaine and then Karen, if that's okay. Does that work for you too?
Sure.
Okay.
Ready to go? Okay. A little piece from Mark 5, which I'm beginning to prepare a Zoom community Bible story listening group here in the retirement center where we live. We're proposing to do that on a once-a-month basis and see how many people will tune in and hear a story and then chat via Zoom about the story. It's an experiment, but we're getting used to Zoom, so why not? And I had missed telling stories at the assisted living part of our community because, of course, we can't have visitors back there because of COVID. But here is part of Mark 5. Jesus went across in the boat again, and a great crowd gathered, and he was by the sea. And then there was the leader of the synagogue, named Jairus, came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet and begged him repeatedly, "Please come, my daughter, my little daughter is at the point of death. Please come and lay your hands on her so that she may be made well and live." And Jesus went with him, and a great crowd pressed in on them. But then there was a woman who had suffered for 12 years with hemorrhages, and she had endured much from many physicians and had spent all that she had, and she was no better, but rather grew worse. And she came up behind him, and she touched the hem of his garment. For she had said, "Oh, if I am only able to touch his clothes, I will be made well." And immediately, she felt the hemorrhage in her body stop. It ceased, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Now, Jesus, immediately realizing that power had gone forth from him, looked around at the crowd and asked, who touched my clothes? And his disciples said to him, "Rabbi, you see the crowd, they're pressing in on you. How can you say who touched me?" But he looked all around to see who had done it. And the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling and fell at his feet and told him the whole truth. And Jesus said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." Well, while he was still talking, some of the people from Jairus' house came and said to him, "Your daughter's dead. Why trouble this teacher any further?" And Jesus overheard this, and he said to Jairus, "Do not fear, only believe." And then he dismissed the crowd and allowed only Peter and James and John, the brother of James, to go with him. And when he entered Jairus' house, there was a great commotion there, people weeping and wailing. And he said to them, "Why make such a commotion? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed and laughed at him. So he sent them all out. And he took the father and the mother of the child and those who had come with him, and he entered where she was. And he took her by the hand, and he said, "Talitha Kuma," which means, "Little girl, get up." And immediately she got up, and she began to walk around. She was 12 years of age. And all there that were there were overcome with amazement. And Jesus said, "Now, no one is to hear about this." And he told them, "Give her something to eat." Amen.
Thank you, Elaine. And Next, we'll have Karen Jones. Karen, unmute your mic.
Down it.
Oh, there you are.
Well, can we do a rerun? That's the story I was going to tell. Except I was going to retell it. So,
Well, I think it's okay because one of the very first times that I met Phil Rugy Jones was when we had either it was a lighting the fire or a favorite Bible stories time. And we were back to back and we ended up telling the same story. But it's great in the comparison and the way different people approach a story. So I think that it is fine for you to tell the same story if you would like.
try. Well, this is retelling.
Yeah.
It was a world in which men wanted sons, and many of them. But Jairus of Capernaum loved his little girl. In fact, she was hardly a little girl anymore. She was 12 that year, and in their world, that was time to begin thinking about a husband for her. But all thoughts of the future stopped when she became ill. Now, Jairus was a man with some resources. He was a leader in the synagogue. He could ask, but command hundreds of prayers. He could call a physician, but the child only grew sicker. And at last it seemed that he and his wife had reached that terrible place where there was nothing else they could do. But because Jairus lived in Capernaum, at just that moment in history, there was something else he could do. Because for those few years, Jesus of Nazareth was living in Capernaum. He wasn't on the road, and Jesus was a healer. He was a healer and a preacher and a controversy. And as a ruler in the synagogue, Jairus knew that there would be criticism if he went to Jesus. But his only daughter was clearly dying. And then he realized that Jesus was out of town. The moment the word came that Jesus had come back to Capernaum, a crowd gathered on the shore. He could hardly be out of the boat before the crowd was around him. And they were listening, but they all stopped when Jairus began to push his way through the crowd. They knew him. They let him through. And then they stared as he fell at the dusty feet of the teacher and begged, Teacher, my little girl, she's so sick. Please come lay your hands on her so that she'll live. And Jesus immediately began to follow Jairus to his home. But the crowd trailed with them. And when they reached town, they pushed into the narrow streets and they could not proceed quickly. Jairus must have been frantic. Hurry, teacher, please, hurry. And suddenly Jesus stopped. And he said, who touched me? Jairus must have panicked. The crowd was pushing hard. Who touched you? Now is when you ask this? One of the disciples tried to help. He said, Teacher, the people are pushing in on you. How can you say you touched me? But Jesus knew the difference between a jostling crowd and a healing touch. And it was clear he was not moving until he found who had touched him. And at last, a woman pushed her way through the crowd and said, "I touched you, teacher. Oh, teacher, I've been bleeding for so long. And none of the doctors could help. In fact, they made it worse. And I spent everything I had. Oh, teacher, I thought that if I could touch even just the hem of your robe, the tassel on your cloak, I would be healed." And I am, teacher. I am healed. I feel it in my body. I'm not bleeding anymore. And for a moment, it was as if there was no one in the street except for Jesus and the woman. And he said, "Oh, daughter, it's your faith that has healed you." Go in peace and be well. And as she melted back into the crowd, Jairus must have tried to hurry the teacher. "Hurry, teacher, hurry, she's so sick." And he must have known when he saw the men from his household pushing through the crowd the other way. Indeed, they said, "Master, don't trouble this teacher anymore. Oh, Master, your little girl has died." But almost before he could panic, he heard the strong voice of the teacher just at his side saying, "Don't despair, only believe." And now Jesus picked up 3 of the disciples and he forbade the others to follow them. When they reached the house of Jairus, already the commotion had started. The hired mourners were wailing. The family members were coming into the house crying aloud. And all this commotion seemed to irritate Jesus. He said, "What is all this fuss? She's not dead, she's just asleep." These people, these professional mourners, knew death, and what he said seemed to them so preposterous that they laughed at him. And he in turn put them all out of the house. And then he and the child's parents and the 3 disciples went quietly into the still house. The child was lying on her bed. Anyone could see how sick she'd been. Her hair was matted and her skin was an odd color, and she was still. She was so still. Jesus went over and took her hand and said, "Little girl, get up." And she did. She sat up, she looked around, she stood up, she began to walk. Her overjoyed parents were weeping, holding her. Now Jesus turned practical and said, "She needs something to eat. You need to feed her." And then he turned stern and he said, "Do not tell anyone about this." And perhaps in gratitude, they would have obeyed. But the mourners were sent home and not called back. And the people who had prayed so ardently for the girl soon saw her alive, walking around the marketplace with her mother. There could be no doubt what had happened. The word of Jesus grew and grew and
Thank you, Karen. That was beautiful.
with you.
Um,
And thank
we
you.
had messages in the chat from Sheila Phillips, from Alice, and from Wendy. And so Tim has promoted them. And if you will turn on your video, and let's see, I see Wendy. So if you want, or would you be ready to start to go first,
I think
Wendy?
Olis
Oh, okay.
is ready.
Oh, Alice is ready there. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought that that was one of those still pictures that people put up. You were so still. Okay, we can go.
Just attentive.
Okay. I really did. I thought it was one of those little photos people put up. Okay, we could go with Alice first, and then if Sheila is there and turns on her video, and then Wendy, and then that'll be it for tonight, I do believe. But thank you all, especially people who, well, both people who signed up ahead of time and people who are ready to just jump right in there when we had a little bit of time. So I do look forward to your story. So we'll go with Alice, and then Wendy, and then Sheila.
Okay, thank you. Jesus, with Peter, James, and John, were coming down from the mountain after a marvelous, wonderful experience. When they came near the other disciples, they saw a large crowd surrounding them, and the teachers of the law were arguing with them. When the people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with wonder, and they ran out to greet him. "Why are you arguing with them?" Jesus asked. A man from the crowd stepped out and said, "Teacher, I brought my son, who is possessed with the spirit, who has robbed him of speech, to you. I thought that your disciples could help them. It seizes him, throws him on the ground, and he foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. I thought your disciples could cast the spirit out, but they could not." Oh, you unbelieving generation, how long must I be with you? How long must I put up with you? Bring the boy to me. And so they brought the boy to him. When the spirit saw Jesus, it threw the boy into a convulsion. He fell to the ground and rolled around, foamed at the mouth. And Jesus asked the father of the boy, "How long has he been like this?" The father said, "Since childhood. Why, sometimes it grabs him and throws him to fire, and sometimes into water, trying to kill him. If you can do anything, have pity on us and help us." "If you can," said Jesus. "Don't you know that when you believe, anything can happen?" Immediately, the father said, "Lord, I do believe. Help my unbelief." Now, Jesus saw a large crowd running toward the scene. So right away, he rebuked the spirit. "I command you, come out of him now and never enter him again." The spirit shrieked and convulsed, and he came out. And they looked at the boy and thought that he looked like a corpse. And many said, "He's dead." But Jesus, he took the boy by the hand and helped him stand to his feet. And he stood. A little while later, when they were back in the house, the disciples asked him privately, Master, why couldn't we cast it out? And Jesus replied, this type can only come out by prayer and fasting. And that's the story from Mark, the 9th chapter, verses 14 through, I think, about 29.
Thank you. Thank you, Alice.
Welcome.
And Wendy and Alice, don't forget to mute your mic.
Okay, I think I'm on. I enjoy the Gospel of Mark, and I have a vision of Mark as being a young teenage boy, because in the Passion, when the soldiers come to arrest Jesus, only in the Gospel of Mark is the story of them grabbing one of the disciples who wiggles out of his tunic and runs away naked. And so it does say a young disciple, and the thought is this is Mark. So here's the story from Mark's point of view, and the idea is that Mark is a maybe 12 or 13-year-old boy, and this is for the Passion. So I'm Mark, and I was with Jesus and all the disciples at Mary Martha's house, and we were waiting for Jesus to go into Jerusalem for his magnificent entry. And finally, that one morning, he said to the disciples, "Oh, it's time. Go into the town of Bethany and bring me a young colt that has never been ridden, a donkey's foal." And I was really amazed at that request. I mean, doesn't Jesus know anything about donkeys? I mean, even when they are trained, they certainly don't want to do what you want to do, let alone an untrained donkey. So I decided to follow after the two disciples to go in and just see what they're going to get. And we went into the town of Bethany, and just as Jesus said, there was a donkey with her foal there. And they took the foal, and the foal was asleep. It was tied up, and they went to untie it, and the donkey was like, suddenly woke up and lashed out. I mean, it was an untrained donkey. And I'm going, yeah, right. Jesus is going to ride this. And the disciples were told that if anyone asks, what are they doing? Just say the master wants the animal. And so that's what they did. They told the people when they were untying the foal that the master wants it. Well, immediately the foal became very quiet and sort of looked around. And then it started nuzzling the disciples as if to say, well, come on, let's get going. And I was really amazed. They untied the foal and they started walking him back to Mary and Martha's where Jesus was. And I followed along behind going, wow, this is really strange. How come the foal knows to come along? I mean, he's an unbroken animal. But anyway, we get back to where Jesus is, and then the people start to put their cloaks on this foal. Well, I figured that the foal would just shake him off, but no, he stood there. And then Jesus took a hold of a little bit of the mane of the foal and popped up on it, and I was waiting for Jesus to get bucked off. I mean, this foal had never been ridden. Certainly Jesus was going to go headlong into the dirt, but the foal just stood there with his head up and his ears perked and was ready to go into Jerusalem. So I followed along behind just amazed. This untrained donkey's foal was carrying the master. And so we're going into Jerusalem, and there's lots of people on the road to Jerusalem because it's the Passover. Everybody's headed to Jerusalem. And they're all saying Hosanna and Hosanna. And we get into Jerusalem, and the first thing that Jesus does is he goes to the temple. And there's this carnival at the temple, all these tables out. This is really a lot of fun. And I'm looking around, and things to buy and things to eat. Oh, wow, this is great. But Jesus is looking kind of like, ooh, what's going on? And I really wasn't sure. But then that night, since my mom lives in Jerusalem, I stayed with my mom to tell her all about the foal. Everybody left and went back to Bethany. And I told her what was going on. Well, the next day, I woke up to all of this funny sounds. And I got dressed real quick, and I went to the temple where all the sounds were coming from. And there was Jesus throwing over all these tables and everything. And I was terrified. So I kind of backed away, and I went back to my mom's house where I stayed and helped her where all the pilgrims were coming in. Well, toward the end of the week, it was Thursday, the day before the preparation for the Passover. Jesus said to some of the disciples, oh, I'm sorry, I left out the one part. The next day in the morning, after Jesus had turned over all the temple tables and everything, I got up and I went to the temple early in that morning, and there was Jesus, and they were praying. And then I was a little scared, but I started praying with them. And then when they were done, Jesus got up and turned around, and he looked at me, and then he held out his hands and gave me a big smile, and I ran to him and he hugged me. And then he explained to me that the temple was sacred, and that all of this selling of animals, this was his Father's temple, and that what they were doing was wrong. And so I felt a little more comfortable. And after that, I hung around with Jesus. So it was a few days later when Jesus said to his disciples, I need two of you to go into the city and find a certain man who's carrying water, and he will lead you to a house, and go into that house and ask the people for upper room for us to have the Passover. Well, I thought this was a little odd because the Passover wasn't until the next night. And my mom was planning for a great big spread of people at her house. And we were hoping that Jesus would come and maybe he'd be king by then. So I followed along behind the two disciples that went into Jerusalem to look for the man carrying water. And all of the people were women. But then there was a man, and we followed him, and we found the room. And now I'm not one of the 12 disciples, not one of the 12 chosen. So I just sort of followed along to find out where this upper room would be. And they led us up there, and I helped with some of the preparations for the Passover. Well, as time for the Passover came, Jesus arrived, and he said to the people, okay, thank you to me and the two other disciples. It's time for you to leave. And so we all bid them goodbye, and we walked out of the little house and pretended to go home. But I knew the back way in, and I circled back around, and I snuck in the back way and up to the upper room, and I could peek into the room to see what was going on. And I could see Jesus and the 12 disciples, and they were having the Passover dinner the night before the actual Passover. And it was fascinating. I could sort of see around through the door at what they were doing. And then towards the end of the meal, Jesus took the loaf of bread and he broke it. And he said, this is my body broken for you. And he shared it with the different people. And they ate. And then he took the cup and he held that up. And he said, this is my blood of the new covenant. And every time you drink it, remember it. Remember me by it. And he passed that around. Well, I'm in the hallway and I'm going, hold it. I'm not supposed to be watching this. What are these people doing? Eating flesh? I mean, we're good Jews. We only eat the right food, and it's definitely not the flesh of people. And what's this drinking of blood? We are good Jews. We do not drink the blood of anything. I was terrified. I ran from that upper room and I went out and hid in the bushes. A little later on, Jesus and his disciples then left the house and I could see them. The moonlight was strong enough. There's a full moon every Passover, and it was strong enough so I could see them going, and I hid so they couldn't see me follow. And the 12 went out with Jesus to the Garden of Gethsemane, and I could see Jesus telling the people, pray for me, stay awake, pray for me. And he went a little further away. And I watched as Jesus was praying hard. And then I looked back at the other disciples who were sound asleep. Well, they'd had a lot of wine. Whenever Jesus has a party, there's always plenty of wine. I saw Jesus come back and wake them up and say, stay and wait, stay awake and pray. But they went back to sleep. Well, this happened a third time, but off in the distance, I could see the lights, and I realized these were Roman soldiers coming. Well, at that point in time, I was more afraid of the Roman soldiers than I was of being discovered by Jesus and his disciples. So I came and joined the disciples, and I was there, and the soldiers came and they grabbed Jesus, and the other disciples ran away. Well, I tried to run, but I'm young and I kind of tripped, and they grabbed me by my tunic, and I wiggled away and I ran off naked. And I ran naked back through the streets of Jerusalem, and I beat on the gate of my mom's house to let me in. And a female servant was there and opened up the gate, and I ran stark naked past them. And I don't know how much more time I have. Can I keep going? I can't see. 30 seconds. Okay, I'm going to end the story there. There's more to the story, and I'll tell the rest another night. Bye.
Thank you. I love the enthusiasm.
Thank you.
And also, so you had a comment about your take on the donkey, the foal that hadn't been ridden, and the appreciation there of that understanding.
Maybe I'll share. I'm a veterinarian, so I'm familiar with animals.
Okay, that's great. That's good. A good point of view. Sheila, are you ready? And then we'll end with Sheila.
I am. I have this camera done right. My cat keeps knocking it down. So. Are we good? Wait, now I can't hear you.
Go ahead, Sheila. That's all right. Most of us are muted. Oops.
How about now?
Okay, you good.
Okay, sorry. I'm pretty new to Zoom, but the best part about this evening is seeing people. Yay. I've been hunkered down as most of us have been, so I'm happy to get out amongst real people. This is a cute little story that I ran across the other day. So there once was a little boy, he was about 5 years old. His name was Charlie, and everybody called him Charlie Boy. And one morning he was dancing around his kitchen and hopping every which way, and his mama was fixing breakfast. And he said to her, "Mama, are there angels, really angels?" And she said, "Well, there's lots of angels in the Bible, so it must be so." And he said, "Do the angels look like those that we see on the posters in the Sunday school classroom? They all look the same kind of. They always have on white dresses, long white dresses, and they all have blonde hair, and they all have a little halo above their head. Do they all look like that?" And she said, "I'm sure I do not know the answer to that." And he said, "I'm going to go out and look for an angel today." And she said, I'll go with you. And he said, oh no, you won't be able to keep up with me. You see, just 2 days before, his mama had tripped going down the back steps. And although she had not broken her ankle, it swelled up huge. And she'd put ice on it. It was a whole lot better, but she was limping still pretty badly. And he said, you won't be able to keep up with me. And she said, well, I'll come pretty close to keeping up. I'll do okay. And I need a little exercise anyway. So after they had breakfast, off they went down the country road. Charlie boy was skipping and hopping and jumping quite a few yards ahead of his mama, but she was keeping a good eye on him. He'd gone just a while when he saw a beautiful car had pulled over to the side. It was one of those convertibles, you know, without the top. It was a bright red color. It was shiny as could be. It was a beautiful car. And driving that car was a beautiful woman. She had long, dark black hair that shone in the sunshine. She was on her cell phone, and that's why she had pulled over, because we all know not to talk on your cell phone while you're driving your car. She had all kinds of diamonds and jewelry of all sparkly kind around her neck and in her ears and on her hair. And she was wearing a satin dress, and she had furs around her neck, and the top was down, so I guess she got cold. And he thought, that is an angel for sure. And Charlie boy ran over to the car, and he put his hands on the side of the car. The top was down, and he said, are you an angel? And she said, get away from here, you dirty little boy. Look what you've done. You got handprints, dirty handprints all over my beautiful car. Now get away, get away, get away. And she jammed down the accelerator and went zooming down the road. And when she did, she kicked up a cloud of dust that just totally enveloped poor Charlie boy. And he fell to his knees, and he was coughing and sputtering, and his eyes were all full of dust, and he was crying. And his mama ran up to him as best she could. And she took her blue gingham apron, and she wiped his face and dried his tears and tried to comfort him, hugged him close to her, and he said to her, that was no angel. And she said, well, perhaps it was not. And he said, I'm not through looking yet. So they went on down the road. He skipped ahead, hopping and jumping, looking for an angel. And all of a sudden, he saw this young maiden walking along the road. She was such a pretty thing. She had a long white dress. She had the blondest hair he'd ever seen, and her skin was like white porcelain, and the bluest of blue eyes. She was just beautiful. And Charlie boy ran up to her and said, you look just like an angel. And she held her arms out and said, well, you dear little boy, come here and let me hold you up close. Now, what made you think I look like an angel? Can you tell me? And just about then, as Charlie boy was fixing to tell her why he thought she was an angel, she spotted her boyfriend coming from the other direction, walking down the road. And she pushed Charlie boy off her body and said, get away, here my boyfriend is coming. I've got to run to him. Look what you've done. You've gotten your dirty feet and hands all over my white dress, and my hair is all awry. You have just made a mess of me. Now get away, get away. And she ran off down the road to meet her boyfriend. Charlie boy had fallen to his knees when she pushed him. His eyes were filled with tears. He had dust all over him from the fall. He was crying and crying. His mother ran up to him, and she took her blue gingham apron, and she wiped his little eyes, and she comforted him as best she could. And he said to her, I don't think that was an angel. And Mama said, well, maybe not, but she's young yet. She may be an angel one day. And Charlie said, can we go home now? I am so tired. And his mama said, sure, we can go home right now. And he said, would you carry me, Mama? And she said, of course I will. And she picked up her little boy and held him close, and he snuggled down up next to her chin, laid his head against her chest, and they walked along slowly because her ankle really hurt. And they walked along as she began to sing a little song to him, the same little song she sang to him every night when she was putting him to bed. And all of a sudden he lifted his head from her shoulder and said, "Mama, could you be an angel?" And she laughed and said, "Oh, who ever heard of an angel wearing a blue gingham apron?" Story.
Thank you. Thank you. That was lovely. That was fun. All right, storytellers and attendees listening. This has been a fun evening of story and getting to see people's faces, like you said. Here we are at the end. And we don't have one scheduled in the, this was scheduled from May through August. And I don't know what the plan is for the future, but if we do end up having some more online lighting the fires, we will get the message out to you. Tim, do you have anything to add to that?
No, it's really up to, I guess everybody here would like to have more, so.
Oh, I think so. It's a great experience.
Okay. Well, why don't I'll set it up and we'll just plan on the third Thursday of September.
Okay.
All right?
Cool.
All right.
Cool.
Beautiful.
All right.
All
now
right, take care. God bless you all real good.
don't be shy. Sign up, everybody.
Yeah, I know. Do sign up when you get the messages.
Thank you.
Okay.
You should look for that email. It has been coming out from the office in the first week of the month. So the email that has the invitation for signing up and the link for signing up. But I'll give you a clue or a hint, a little secret. And that link for signing up is the same every month. So you don't really have to wait.
Mhm.
All I have to do is set it up for the next one, which I can do in the next few days. And then you can go on and sign up for the one in September. But if you forget to do it this week, then the message will come out the first week of September. All right. Good night,
Alrighty.
everyone. Bless you.
Good night.
And
Good night, and
it was
everyone.
lovely to see you.
safe.
Good to see your faces.
All right.
Night, shalom.
Take care.
Good night.